Hey, what's up? How you doing? So in today's video, we are going to be talking about news producing because this has been officially over a year now, about a year and 3 months when I post this, or a little less than 3 months, that I have been producing news professionally in my career instead of just in high school and college. And I've learned a lot, like a lot, over the past year. I already learned a lot in school, obviously, because I went to school for it, but there's nothing like real world experience to really teach you a ton in a short amount of time. And I just wanted to go over some of the bigger points that have stuck out to me of things that I've learned throughout my career so far. So if you're looking at going into news producing or just want to learn a little bit more about journalism in general, these are going to be just a few things that I have learned since I started a year ago. Now, I am in a top 50 market. I'm in Norfolk, which is I think 43 as far as news markets go, which is a relatively high market to be starting out in at your first job. A lot of people tend to aim for top 100, but a lot of times you're a little bit higher up in the 100s, like in the top 80 or 70 or so. But producers can typically get a little bit lower, so you can get a better job right out of college as opposed to, like, say, a reporter, because that is a little bit more of a competitive, because a lot more people want to be on camera than want to be producing. So I was fortunate in having a lot of experience from high school and college and my internship that I did in college to allow me to be able to get the job in this market. But because it's top 50, it really kicked my butt into gear when I started here a year ago. I started in January of 2020. So when I moved out here, started the job, it was I want to say about 2 to 3 weeks of sort of a butt kick into figuring out how to produce at this level, because obviously I hadn't yet. When I interned in Chattanooga, which is market at the time, I want to say it was 82 or something like that. Obviously, quite a big shift. But I've learned a lot in the past year, and I just wanted to share with you guys just a couple of things. I also have other videos going more in depth about what news producing is and other things that I've learned, what you should know about doing it in college, and so on and so forth. And I will link those videos in the cards and then have some end screens on them as well if you want to check those out. But this is just going to be some general, more specific things that have just stuck out to me through my past year of learning in the real world for the first time. Okay, this first one that I'm going to talk about is kind of specific, like I said, but it's that long form seems to be coming back. And what I mean by that is over the course of say the past decade-ish, things have been very, very fast-paced in terms of the news world. Everyone is we want to say things as quickly as possible. We want to have short little stories and give you just basically headlines of stuff, because that's what the people want. People have short attention spans. We can't be going in depth on stuff because people don't want that. They want it as fast as possible. And there is some truth to that. There is a big thing about how when people are reading articles online, they usually see a headline and then they don't click on it. Or if they do click on it, they might read the lead sentence and then move on, not really focus a whole lot of their attention on the whole story. But it's different for broadcast, obviously, because we're not asking you to click on something and take your attention into a certain story. We have already decided all the stories as a producer that we are going to be giving you. We sort of have the advantage of being able to just pick the most interesting or the biggest stories we think there are of the day and presenting them to you in the most interesting way possible in our newscast. That's our job. Something that I have sort of been taught and I kind of go back and forth on is the amount of time to dedicate to a story. Packages are the ones that reporters make that are 90 seconds to 2 minutes long of those pre-recorded things that you hear a reporter track over, and it's a bunch of stuff edited together. That is a package, and that allows you to have more time dedicated to a story. But when it comes to pacers, which is what you call those shorter 30-second stories that the anchors read that have nothing to do with the reporter packages usually, that's what the producer is writing. And a lot of times you will hear people say, depending on where you work, oh, these pacers are not allowed to be longer than 20 seconds, 25 seconds. And a lot of times you can't really tell a story in 20 seconds or 25 seconds. You can tell the gist of a story, but you really have to be very specific in nailing some stuff down. And it's an art form, honestly, to be able to give as much information as possible in a concise and interesting way in such a short period of time. And that's something that a producer has to learn over time. But My point that I'm trying to make about the long form thing is I think people are starting to become more interested and more okay with having fewer longer stories as opposed to just like a bunch of rapid fire short stories where you don't really get all of the information. An example of this is the company I work for, Scripps, actually did a series of polls for their audience to see what they were more interested in seeing. And one of the conclusions that they came to was that a lot of the viewers are more interested in long form and getting fewer stories if they get more information about the stories. So that's not just something that's my opinion. I think that's literally backed up by research that our company has done. Of course, that's not all encompassing everybody because that is just one study and one poll. But I think it's showing a trend that we're kind of going from that super short, fast bursts of news, and the pendulum is sort of shifting over to being more okay with long form. And I think that's one of the reasons that documentaries are, they're pretty popular right now on Netflix. If you want to go watch a documentary, there's plenty of options that have gotten millions and millions of views because people are a bit more interested in getting more in-depth information. I say all that to say, I think that's something to think about when you are making your newscasts. Instead of focusing on how many stories can I squeeze into this newscast, focus on how much meat can I fit in my story, regardless of if that makes it a little bit longer, and what stories warrant more in-depth looks and not, and then maybe some don't. Depending on your station, some are going to be a bit more hardcore than others on certain things, like timing. For example, some stations I know are pretty you can only have a 90-second tops reporter package. That's fine. That's going to be how some stations are. But if you work on one that's a little more loose, a little less strict with reporter packages times and story times for your producer pacers, then you can be a little more lenient with letting the packages be a bit longer if the package warrants it. If a reporter has a package that is a little bit longer, it might be, say, 2 minutes or 2:10, they might message the EP or you as the producer and say, hey, my package is a little bit longer. Is that okay, or do you need me to cut it? And that gives you the power to say yes or no. And just for me personally, as a producer, I pretty much always tell the reporter yes, they are allowed to have the package be longer as long as that's the time they need to tell the story. That's pretty much my answer. As a producer, you can get so focused on timing because that's one of your main jobs, is timing out the show. You can get so focused and tunnel vision on, I have my show this way. If you make this package 20 seconds longer than I thought it was, I'm going to have to kill something else. And then I don't want to do that. So no, it can't be long. It can't be longer than 90 seconds. But that longer story might actually be more interesting than the 20-second pacer that you have to kill now. So it's just a matter of focusing more on making sure the content that you do have in your newscast is being fleshed out and is interesting, and not being so focused on, I want to have as many stories as possible and I just want to shove in as much information as I possibly can into this newscast. Because honestly, a really interesting story is going to draw a viewer in more than them just hearing rapid fire information. Because let's be honest, most people don't just sit down and dedicate themselves to watching the news and just staring at the TV and looking at every story. You're on your phone, you're cooking, you're doing something else, and you have the news on in the background and you hear it. So rapid fire stories that don't sound very interesting are just going to go over their head. They're not going to pay attention. You have to focus in on what's interesting and flesh it out in order to really have the best newscast possible, in my personal and humble opinion. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is speed in which you report a story. So one thing that you hear a lot about when you start out in news, or just general at any point in your life in news stations always want to be the first to report something. They want to break the story, which is, it's important. It's great to break a story, right? That's awesome if you get to. But it's not as important to break a story as it is to make sure that your story's facts are straight. And I know that sounds very obvious, but trust me, it happens where stations get so bent out of shape about, I have to be the first station to report this story. Say scanner traffic, which is like a police scanner. They hear about a shooting or something on a police scanner, they report it. They don't have all the facts yet because they don't have the press release yet from the PIO of whatever city that the shooting happened in. They might be missing information. They might be wrong about something. It's just something that you really need to pay attention to in order to be a trustworthy source of information. Because if you start reporting stuff and you get known as a station that is sometimes wrong on their facts, obviously that's not good. Obviously, with your station, you want to be very trustworthy and you want the community to be able to know that they're getting the right information, not necessarily getting it the fastest. If you need to take an extra hour before you break a story, I think that's way more important that you make sure you got your facts straight than you were the first to report it or the public got the information an hour earlier. Another thing, though, on the flip side of this, speed is really important in a newsroom because that's the game. You have really harsh deadlines that you have to meet throughout the day. And again, there is the goal to be the fastest when you're reporting stuff, so that is an underlying sort of urgency in and of itself, on top of the urgency of having newscast deadlines that you have to meet that are very strict deadlines. If your show is not ready at 6 o'clock, it doesn't matter. Like, you're going on at 6 o'clock, you got to make it work. So speed and being focused is a very, very important thing when you are doing news, which this isn't something that I've learned this past year. I already knew that from college and from high school. But something that I have learned is how weirdly paced sometimes the day can be in a newsroom, because you can go hours with nothing really happening and you're just sort of doing your thing, writing your stories. It's pretty relaxing. And then all of a sudden, 3 shootings happen or 3 different stories break of some kind, regardless of what they are. Technology craps out for some reason, and a reporter can't send their package back, or the switcher for production is breaking and we don't have video assets in the shows. There's all sorts of things that can just go wrong at any point in time, and your day can go from this lull, very slow paced, to just everything is going wrong and the world is exploding and you still have a show in 10 minutes. So that happens. And you just have to deal with it. And my advice for this is to always be on top of your work and get it done sooner than you need to get it done. Whether this could be a reporter or a producer doesn't matter. Anyone in the newsroom, I think it's important for them to try to get their work done as quickly and efficiently as possible, because you never know when crap's going to hit the fan. If I'm doing a show and I know I have an hour before my newscast, and that's plenty of time for me to write, say, 5 more stories and throw in some anchor reads and some director cues and whatever, and I'm just sort of twiddling my thumbs because I know I have ample amount of time to do that, and then crap hits the fan, I have to deal with the crap that just hit the fan on top of those 5 stories that I still needed to write. So just getting everything out of the way so you're set if something weird does happen, you have time to deal with it. That's good. As far as reporters go, a lot of times if you get your story done and then breaking news happens, you can have your story finished and sent in, and then you can go cover the breaking news. So that's something that doesn't matter what job you're doing. It's just really good in news to get your stuff done as quickly as possible, just in case breaking news happens or technology fails us, which is common. And that brings me to my last thing, which is crime is abundant. A lot of people are criminals. A lot of people are out here shooting each other, stabbing each other, robbing each other, crashing into each other. Just so many things. All the crime happens all the time. I don't know why. People, get your act together. Stop being criminals. Or if you don't work in news, especially someone as assignment desk or a producer or something, you really do not realize how much crime goes on, especially if you live in a city. You won't know because you don't hear about every single shooting or stabbing or whatever until you're reporting on every single shooting and stabbing. And you get every single press release, or at least all the ones that, we know about, all the ones you get a press release for. There's a gosh dang lot of them. So if you're working, depending on your market size, this is going to vary. If you're in a smaller market, there's going to be fewer shootings and fewer crime stories because there's just not as many people living in your area. If you live in El Paso, Texas, which is market 90-something, versus DC, which is 6 or 7 or something like that, going to be quite a crime difference just because of the population difference. So when you are in a smaller market, you're probably going to be reporting on all of those, and they're probably going to be your lead story generally. When it comes to where I live or in a higher market, you're going to need to be pretty good at gauging the newsworthiness of crime stories. Because there's this old phrase of if it bleeds, it leads, meaning that if you have a crime story, basically, you put it up at the top of your show. But that's kind of an outdated phrase. I don't know why we sort of shifted from this in news culture. I agree with the shift. I don't know why it happened, but either way. A lot of times, depending on your station, but I think this is more of a general rule of things that are happening now, you report on every shooting unless you live somewhere like New York City or something where there's just so many, there's no need to report all of them. If you live somewhere where there's only like, say, 2 a day instead of 20, then you're probably still going to report every single shooting. But it's a matter of how big a deal you make it, where you put it in your show, and if it's something that you decide to send a reporter to. If you're just a producer, it's not your decision to send a reporter somewhere unless you're like me and you work on weekends and there's no managers there. So that is part of your decision. But if you're just a producer, that's just something that you have to decide where you want to put it in your show. And just knowing that if it happens a lot, if there's a lot of shootings and a person got shot and it's not life-threatening and it's like the suspect is in custody, there's like no possible way anyone else is going to be getting hurt and the person's not going to die, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, that sounds bad to say because a person got shot, but from a producing standpoint, it's really not that big of a deal. If someone got shot and they died, if someone got shot and like a mad gunman is on the loose and, you know, they might shoot someone else, that's different. It's a little bit bigger of a deal. You just gotta really look into the details of the story and decide on if you think it's a big enough deal to lead your show or to go just farther down in it because it's just not, you know, not that important to the community. Anyway, if you go into producing, just be aware that you are going to be expecting a lot of crime stories to happen and you are going to realize that your city is kind of trashy. I don't know. I've not lived in that many different cities, so I don't know how much crime there is across the board. But here, there's a freaking lot. Anyway, I have more things that I learned, but I know this video is already getting long, so I'm going to cut it off here. If you guys want to hear more things that I have learned as a news producer, you want more in-depth details and stuff about this kind of thing, just let me know in the comments. Also, just putting out there, I'm literally 22 years old. I have been doing this for a long time because I've been doing it since my junior year of high school. So I have a lot of experience, but I don't know everything. And these are just some of my things that I've learned, some opinions thrown in there, you know, just this is my opinions. So do with that what you will. Anyway, if you guys like this video, you can give it a thumbs up. You can also subscribe to me if you would like. Put out new videos every single week. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.